So expanded newborn screening, actually if you just look at India figures, and if you were to actually do this, we would be far outnumbering China in the year 2015 itself. In 2030, we are already outnumbering China. So if you look at what India is dealing with, the current birth rates are 26 millions. The crude birth rate is 21.4. It's declined by 1 point. The institutional deliveries have gone up to 85.6%. The NMR is still high, and this high NMR is actually the first 7 days of birth. So if you look at this, the births per minute are 51. The births which are actually accessible in the country are now 96.9%, of which even institutional births because of the Janani Suraksha Yojana have been really increased. So if you look at newborn screening, it's going to be the most important public health advance after immunization, and that has been the take that if I were to do something, I would do newborn screening, and I'm going to take you through the cost-benefit analysis of newborn screening. So what is expanded? What is core? Should I do 4 disorders? Should I do 5 disorders? Or should I do the whole panel? So let's look at what India should be doing and what we should be doing. So all this is based on a criteria which was actually given by Wilson and Jugner in 1962 by WHO, and I'm going to take you through that for first. So what actually is started by the country first is called the core panel, and what you add on as the country goes by is richer and more beneficial. You call that an expanded panel. So a core panel is the first panel decided by experts in the country to start newborn screening, and it's also gone in that disorders which have become amenable by heel prick testing, also called as bright blood spot testing, are actually the disorders which can be detected by tandem mass spectrometry. So this is also called expanded newborn screening, because you move from one single drop, single test, to a single drop and multiple tests. So if you do one drop, you can actually check for multiple disorders. So what has actually happened in India? There has been a central newborn screening committee with international scientists. There have been an agreement on core disorders. We have established technology like fluoroimmunoassay and ELISA. There have been laid down SOPs, and the neonatology, the need has already been felt. So let's look at the first disorder, which is a template disorder, which is called congenital hypothyroidism. And I'm going to take you through congenital hypothyroid. Why India would do this in this present situation? If you look at the test which is available, it's a very easy test which is called TSH. It not only tells you primary congenital hypothyroidism, but it also gives you a sensitive index of iodine deficiency and iodine excess. If you were not to diagnose these babies at birth, you would diagnose them at 4.7 years. And if you diagnose them at 4.7 years, the IQ drops by 3 to 5 points every month. And therefore, by the time you detect them, they're already intellectually retarded. So congenital hypothyroidism forms a template disorder for core disorders. And let's have a brief look at the incidence. The incidence varies from 1 in 833 to 1 in 3,400, but safely we are somewhere between 1 in 1700 to 1 in 2000. So all the hospitals which are having delivery rates of more than 7,000 per year would actually be losing 2 to 3 babies every year with congenital hypothyroidism. So this is how the normative data for TSH has been published by the ICMR, and also we have a screening for core disorders, which is hypothyroid and congenital adrenal hyperplasia. Now I'm going to share a very personal story with you. I was presenting all this to some minister to implement newborn screening in the country, and when I talked about preventable mental retardation, he wasn't interested because it did not hit his voters' bureaus. So I talked to him, I said in Hindi, I asked him, sir, how many times have you crossed the traffic red light in Delhi, and how many times a transgender has asked you for money? He said multiple times. So if that is true, 80% of this transgender population, which does not occur in any other country, is actually having a preventable disorder which is called congenital adrenal hyperplasia, and these babies are frisked right at birth to form the so-called Hijra sector of our community. And what could we do for them? we could actually just do a very sensitive assay, which is neonatal 17 OHP. Now, if you look at what happens if you don't do this, you don't have any male baby living with congenital adrenal hyperplasia, because all these male babies have no ambiguity, and because they have no ambiguity, they have a death which is called neonatal death, SIDS, hyponatremia, hyperkalemia, possibly sepsis. It's never picked up, and these babies die. The incidence, if you have a look at the incidence of snapshot, as high as 1 in 6,000 to 1 in 7,000. So do we deserve to have a sector which is voting separately and mentally retarded babies? If you look at the births per minute, if you were just to implement hypothyroid and congenital adrenal hyperplasia in the country, you would be saving 1 baby per minute in the country. There is no program which can save something bigger than this, and nothing which is so cost effective. I'm going to take you through expanded. G6PD, I was asked, you can do neonatal hyperbilirubinemia. Why do you want to screen for G6PD? If I have 20 or 30 babies being discharged every day, which is that baby who I will follow up for neonatal jaundice and who can develop chronic hemolytic anemia and connectors and cerebral palsy? It is this baby with G6PD, and the incidence is very, very high, as high as 1 in 129 to 1 in 192 from our study from the northern of India. Coming to galactosemia, it's a very easy test. The incidence varies from 1 in 10,000 to 1 in 80,000. You can have cataracts, recurrent sepsis, and jaundice. What all do you need? Only exclusion of milk and milk-based products. And all these soya products are easily available in the country. So galactosemia can be introduced at least in phase 2. Coming to biotinidase deficiency, a cause of hearing loss, seizures. And look at this, the late onset forms resembling transverse myelitis and Wernicke's encephalopathy. So the neurologists have also started thinking metabolic. They could be actually having biotinidase deficiency. So expanded NBS is an NBS which is added on to the country, and it is actually based on the cost effectiveness, the utility of symptomatic screening, and what needs to be added. So this is a score which is calculated. So the first score here is MCAD, then sickle cell, congenital adrenal hyperplasia, congenital hypothyroidism, biotinidase deficiency, and these are what should be instituted later on in our country. So MCAD was the diagnosis, which is very easy because these babies die in the bed. They are called sick deaths, cot deaths. Nobody comes to know what happened. They think whether it was long QT syndrome or was it actually MCAD. So we don't have much of MCAD. But this is a disorder which is just treatable by giving feeds every 3 hourly to the baby, a disorder for which no treatment is required in terms of cost. So MCAD is an early disorder to bring in, and this has brought in mass spectrometry. So if we look at what is the status of newborn screening in India, we possibly have, this is the high-risk statistic screening, a very high incidence of organic acidurias and amino acid disorders. If you look at the birth prevalence, every week in India, there would be a baby born with an inborn error of metabolism, with a 25% risk of recurrence in the next pregnancy and 100% for that child. So this is expanded newborn screening. Data from this is courtesy Dr. B.K. Thelma, and in our study, we had an incidence of 1 in 191 of total disorders which are called IEMs. And if this is the burden, and if somebody says newborn screening should not be evaluated, I would definitely beg to differ on this incidence. Now everybody asks, what are these panels? Should I do 54 tests? Should I do 100 tests? See, the tandem mass automatically picks up primary targets and secondary targets. You don't have to order for them. Once you have done tandem mass spectrometry, you can automatically detect 34 core disorders and 56 added disorders. So this is not a panel. This is what automatically comes out. This is tandem mass spectrometry, which screens for amino acids, acyl carnitines with a sensitivity of more than 95% using dried blood spots, and you cannot check peroxisomal disorders or neurotransmitters by tandem mass spectrometry. So you always go on to a second specimen and confirmatory testing either by molecular or by mass spectrometry. So it's an easy test from newborn screening, and this has moved the bench to the bedside. So if you look at expanded screening from one of the countries, you can look at the incidence 1 in 2400. The specificity is 99.67 and the sensitivity is about 100%. So therefore, if you look at what would be the amino acid disorders, there would be 1 in 5,100, and a total IEMs would be 1 in 1,500 at least in our country. So how do you make a diagnosis of these disorders? If you get a blood spot and you do phenylalanine, if that is raised, and the phenylalanine tyrosine ratio is also raised, you can make a diagnosis of PKU. If isoleucine, valine are also raised, it is probably MSUD. If arginine is raised, it is arginemia. And similarly, for important thing is, you cannot always distinguish between type 1 citrullinemia and citrulline deficiency. So standalone test, Tandem mass, is only a screening test. You always require another confirmatory test. Similarly, for acyl carnitines, you can make a diagnosis by using C6, which is medium chain, C8, which is medium chain, C14, C16, and C18 are long chain, and you can make a diagnosis almost always by dried blood spot. So similarly, you can make a diagnosis of many disorders, but you have to quantify by HPLC, GCMS, or mutation analysis for the diagnosis. There are a lot of other screening tools available, like screening for LSDs, screening for hemoglobinopathies, screening for hearing disabilities. Also, it needs to be added. And what is more important is, Minnesota was fined because you can save the DNA of the child. You can actually do the DNA analysis on the same dried blood spot. So this is also an expansion, DNA based, so there are issues of confidentiality, anonymity, and ethics. It's also used for pre-symptomatic detection, carrier rate implementation. It can also influence reproductive decisions. So it was first tried on in skin, and you can understand, just from this simple punch, one punch of the dried blood spot, you can actually collect 20 nanograms of DNA and make a final diagnosis by newborn screening. So you can use this as a second tier screening, and when the enzyme assays are difficult, and there is always a need to look at false positivity on the biochemical tests. It's also important for neonates who die without a diagnosis. If you have collected the blood spot, you can make a DNA-based diagnosis. You can also pick up disorders which were not tested by Tandem mass, like disorders of pyridoxine, creatinine, which are now completely treatable and will give you an idea whether your newborn screening was false positive, because screening will have a lot of false positives. You aim to have a sensitivity of 100%, but the specificity can never be 100%. So this is also called precision neonatology, with rapid genomics in a critically sick child with a yield of 57% and diagnosis in 30% babies. So what should be done? If you at least implement core of CH, CH, and G6PD in the country, and implement expanded in sick newborn units, where 1 in every 300 children admitted to any NICU will actually have a metabolic disorder. Diets are now available in India, and this is the Diet for Life initiative. These are now being manufactured, so no longer a tin is costing 3,000. It is now costing between 800 to 1,200 rupees only, and now the government is also considering giving the treatment free under the umbrella of RBSK to all the babies born with IEMs. So the advantage is the neonatal population. If you look at the cost of one NICU admission per day, it is 10,000 to 50,000. If you look at the cost of these babies, if you do a clinical exome, it is less than this, and you can make a diagnosis in all of these babies and save these babies through now what is called as symptom and sign associated genome analysis. So you can institute therapy. You can decide which baby should I follow up, from radical care to palliative care. You can identify which disorders are likely to recur, and this is the list of IEMs that we had. Even the congenital hypothyroid babies are having mutations because we have so much of inbreeding. Sharmas marrying Sharmas, Agarwals marrying Agarwals, and so much of inbreeding that we fail to understand that just this would almost behave like consanguinity in our part of the country with such a high incidence of treatable disorders. Now this is a slide I want all of you to look into, a cost-benefit analysis. Now if you just look at congenital hypothyroidism, it gives you only a 10 paisa treatment. The cost of screening congenital hypothyroidism is 240 rupees. And if you add on to screening, and if these babies were going to live for say 60 years, and they were to earn only 2 lakhs and employed for 39 years, the incremental cost to the country would be more than 1 crore in just one baby saved. So no other thing can give you a cost benefit analysis of this kind. So the recommendation is, yes, screen, do the core panel in India, screen the sick newborns, look at the treatable IMs because most of them are now becoming treatable. Diagnostic centers for prenatal diagnosis are spread all through the country. The cost of Sanger sequencing has come down to 10 to 20,000. Even if you cannot save the index case in many situations, you can save the family by doing cascade screening and give prenatal diagnosis in the next pregnancy so that all these babies will say thank you because we have to screen all of them for a much better future. And newborn screening is going to make a big hit. So we will move from Hall F to Hall A 10 years down the lane, probably. Thank you so much.